For decades, Nashville has thrived on whispers, and nothing spread faster than a juicy rumor. But what if those disgusting old country music rumors were not just gossip, but the shocking truth? From drunken meltdowns on stage to violent outbursts in back rooms, these stories reveal the darker, messier side of country legends we thought we knew. Today, we uncover 12 disgusting old country music rumors which were true, and the reality may be even more shocking than the rumor itself. Hank Williams Sr., the drunken collapse behind the legend. Hank Williams Sr. is remembered as one of the greatest country music pioneers, but behind the timeless classics was a man plagued by demons. For years, there was a nasty rumor circulating in Nashville that Hank was so consumed by alcohol and pills that he would sometimes stagger onto stage unable to stand, slurring through songs before collapsing in front of horrified audiences. At the time, fans brushed it off as gossip. Surely the voice behind your cheating heart couldn't fall that low. But the truth was even darker. Williams had developed a crippling addiction to alcohol and painkillers, a mix that worsened after a back injury left him in constant agony. Bandmates and fellow performers later confirmed that the rumors of Hank vomiting backstage, forgetting lyrics, or passing out mid-performance were not exaggerations, but real, shameful incidents. One infamous story recalled him being too drunk to walk onto the stage in Knoxville, forcing promoters to refund angry fans. Another night in 1952, he allegedly collapsed in his hotel room after a binge so heavy that doctors feared he wouldn't wake up. The disgusting reality behind these rumors was not just his dependency, but the sheer spectacle of it. Audiences who came for the music often left in shock at the man's condition. Williams. Substance abuse spiraled so far out of control that it ended in tragedy. On January 1st, 1953, he was found dead in the back of a Cadillac at just 29 years old, with morphine and alcohol coursing through his system. What began as whispers about drunken behavior became a grim confirmation that Hank Williams Sr.'s genius was inseparably tied to his self-destruction. His legacy endures, but the truth behind the rumors is a cautionary tale that Nashville has never forgotten. To Tammy Wynette, behind the curtains of abuse. Tammy Wynette, the first lady of country music, projected elegance and resilience on stage, but her private life was haunted by a rumor that many in Nashville whispered about for years. The talk was that Tammy endured violent abuse at the hands of her husbands, and that her glamorous smile often hid bruises and scars. At first, fans dismissed it as slander. After all, she was America's sweetheart, the voice of Stand By Your Man. But over time, the truth emerged, and it was uglier than the gossip. Wynette herself admitted in interviews and autobiographies that she had endured physical and emotional abuse, most notoriously from her fifth husband, George Ritchie. Friends and colleagues recalled hushed conversations where Tammy would show up shaken or withdrawn, unable to fully conceal what was happening behind closed doors. Even earlier, during her marriage to George Jones, there were reports of volatile arguments that sometimes turned physical when Jones was drinking heavily. The darkest moment came in 1978, when Tammy claimed she had been abducted at gunpoint and beaten. For years, whispers suggested it was a cover story for domestic violence, and although the case was never fully resolved, many close to her suspected that the abduction tale was a desperate attempt to hide the truth. The confirmation of these rumors shattered the polished image of Tammy Wynette's personal life. Her songs about love and devotion carried an added layer of tragic irony, as she was singing through the pain of her own suffering. What fans once dismissed as ugly gossip was in fact the heartbreaking reality of a woman trapped in cycles of abuse. Tammy Wynette's story remains a stark reminder that even country royalty can carry scars hidden behind the spotlight, and that sometimes the rumors we wish were false are the ones that cut the deepest. 3. George Jones, the lawnmower ride to the liquor store. George Jones, the possum, was both revered and ridiculed for his wild behavior, and one rumor in particular became legendary in Nashville. Fans whispered that Jones was once so desperate for alcohol that after his wife hid the car keys, he climbed onto a riding lawnmower and drove 8 miles down the highway just to buy liquor. At first, it sounded too ridiculous, too disgusting to be true. Surely one of country music's biggest stars wouldn't stoop that low. But the rumor turned out to be fact. Jones himself later confirmed the bizarre tale in his autobiography, even laughing at the memory. In truth, his life was riddled with such humiliations. He was a notorious alcoholic, often showing up drunk to shows or not showing up at all. His unpredictable behavior became so common that promoters nicknamed him No-Show Jones. The lawnmower incident became the most infamous example, but it was only one of countless episodes where his addiction dragged his reputation through the mud. Behind the humor that some fans found in the story was a darker reality. Driving a lawnmower down a public road was not just embarrassing, it was dangerous, reckless, and a symbol of just how far Jones had fallen under the grip of alcohol. His marriages, especially the turbulent union with Tammy Wynette, were scarred by violence and chaos, much of it fueled by drinking. The lawnmower ride that began as a laughable rumor became the disgusting proof of how addiction can turn even a legend into a spectacle. Jones eventually sought sobriety later in life, but the shadow of that image, country's biggest star chugging along the highway on a lawnmower, remains burned into Nashville folklore as one of the strangest truths ever confirmed. 4. Loretta Lynn fights with her own audience. Loretta Lynn, the coal miner's daughter, stood as a symbol of resilience and fiery independence in country music. But for decades, there was a rumor that her temper sometimes got the best of her, that she had actually fought with fans during her own concerts. At the time, it sounded outrageous, even disgusting. How could one of Nashville's brightest stars, known for her trailblazing songs about women's strength, stoop to physical altercations with her audience? The rumor turned out to be true, and Loretta herself admitted it. Known for her no-nonsense personality, she revealed that if anyone disrespected her on stage, especially if another woman came at her accusing her of stealing their man, she wouldn't hesitate to strike back. One infamous story had her halting a performance mid-song to confront a heckler, fists flying in the middle of the crowd before security could intervene. Far from denying it, Loretta later laughed about those incidents, proudly confessing, "I've never been scared of a fight in my life." But beneath the humor was a reality that shocked Nashville's polite society. Seeing a star physically attack someone from the stage went against every rule of the industry, where performers were supposed to maintain poise and charm. Instead, Loretta's brawls reinforced her image as raw, unpolished, and fiercely authentic. The disgusting truth behind the rumor was that Loretta Lynn wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty. She could sell out the Grand Ole Opry one night and throw a punch at a heckler the next. And oddly enough, those stories only cemented her reputation as one of the toughest women in country music. A legend who could sing about heartbreak and still defend herself in the same breath. Chapter 5. Johnny Cash, the forest fire. He couldn't outrun. Johnny Cash, the man in black, carried an aura of rebellion, but one old rumor painted him not just as reckless but downright destructive. Whispers in Nashville claimed that Cash had accidentally set a massive forest fire in California during one of his binges, killing wildlife and scorching acres of land. At the time, many dismissed it as exaggerated gossip. How could a singer be responsible for such a disaster? The ugly truth was that it happened. In 1965, while camping in Los Padres National Forest, Cash's truck caught fire after he had been drinking heavily. The blaze spread quickly, burning over 500 acres and killing an estimated 49 endangered condors. The government sued Cash for the damages, and in true defiant fashion, he refused to apologize. When asked if he started the fire, Cash reportedly sneered, "It was my truck, and it burned up. So what?" This attitude shocked both his fans and the industry. The idea of a country superstar casually destroying protected land and wildlife wasn't just embarrassing, it was disgusting. To make matters worse, Cash's behavior around that time, excessive drinking, drug use, and destructive rages, cemented the story as more than just rumor. It was a symbol of his chaotic spiral. Though he later sought redemption, embraced faith, and became an icon of survival, the forest fire rumor remained one of the darkest stains on his legend. What many thought was a tall tale about the outlaw side of Johnny Cash was, in fact, an environmental disaster sparked by one man's recklessness. Number 6. Willie Nelson, the taxman's ugly truth. Willie Nelson, the braids, the outlaw, the eternal face of country rebellion, his image was larger than life. But for years, an ugly rumor followed him like a shadow, that he had cheated the government out of millions in unpaid taxes. In Nashville, many shrugged it off as just another tall tale. Willie was a free spirit, sure, but could he really be hiding a debt big enough to bankrupt him? The rumor was absolutely true. In 1990, the Internal Revenue Service came crashing down on Nelson with one of the largest individual tax bills in history, a staggering $16.7 million. Agents seized nearly everything: his ranch, his recording studio, even cherished family heirlooms. Fans were stunned as images of government officials hauling away Willie's possessions circulated in the press. The IRS even released some of his memorabilia to auction, a humiliating spectacle for a man who had been singing about American pride for decades. The most disgusting part wasn't just the size of the debt, but the way it exposed how deeply Nelson's finances had been mismanaged. His accountants had led him into risky tax shelters, but Willie signed the papers, and the responsibility was his. For a moment, it looked like the outlaw icon might lose everything he had built. But in true Willie fashion, he turned disaster into music. He struck a deal with the IRS to release a double album titled The IRS Tapes, Who'll Buy My Memories, with proceeds going straight to pay off the debt. Slowly but surely, Nelson dug himself out of the financial pit. Still, the rumor that once sounded absurd, that a country superstar had stiffed Uncle Sam for millions, was disgustingly, humiliatingly true. How number 7. Tanya Tucker. Teenage scandals that weren't just gossip. Tanya Tucker burst onto the country scene at just 13 years old with Delta Dawn, and almost immediately, Nashville began buzzing with rumors. Whispers claimed that the teenage star was living far wilder than her age, entangled in scandalous affairs with much older men and diving headfirst into a lifestyle that would have crushed seasoned veterans. At the time, many dismissed it as jealous gossip, just the industry trying to tear down a girl who rose too fast. But the rumors were true, and the reality was even more disturbing. By her late teens, Tanya was openly involved with stars like Glenn Campbell, nearly 20 years her senior. Their relationship was notoriously turbulent, filled with cocaine, violent fights, and public meltdowns that landed them in tabloids across America. Friends later admitted that Tanya, still barely out of high school, was already spiraling in a haze of drugs and toxic love. The disgusting element wasn't just the chaos, but the sheer imbalance of power. An underage girl thrust into an adult world where predators circled. Tanya herself admitted years later that she had been too young to handle the fame, the pressure, and especially the dangerous relationships. Her honesty in interviews and in her memoir confirmed what Nashville gossips had whispered for decades. The shocking rumors about her teenage years weren't slander. They were her lived reality. Despite the damage, Tanya Tucker clawed her way back, reinventing herself and earning respect as one of country's fiercest female voices. Yet the truth behind those early rumors still lingers as one of Nashville's most unsettling chapters, a cautionary tale of how a young starlet's rise came at a disgusting cost. 8. Porter Wagoner, controlling Dolly Parton's every move. Porter Wagoner was once celebrated as the rhinestone-clad star who gave Dolly Parton her first big break. But behind the sequins and smiles, Nashville buzzed with an ugly rumor. Porter was obsessively controlling, exploiting Dolly's talent, and making her life a living nightmare. At first, it sounded like bitter gossip. After all, on television, they looked like the perfect duet, laughing and harmonizing under the spotlight. The truth was far darker. Dolly herself later revealed how suffocating the partnership had become. Porter dictated her career moves, demanded financial control, and treated her more like property than a partner. He reportedly told her that she could never succeed without him, pressuring her to remain under his wing, even as she longed to strike out on her own. Behind the scenes, their professional relationship turned toxic, filled with heated arguments, slammed doors, and legal threats. When Dolly finally decided to leave his show in 1974, she poured her heartbreak into the song I Will Always Love You, a farewell ballad that was both tender and defiant. The irony was that the world saw it as a love song, while in reality, it was her goodbye to an oppressive mentor. Years later, Porter even sued her for breach of contract, cementing what many had whispered all along. The rumors of exploitation were not only true, but documented in court. The disgusting reality wasn't that Dolly rose to fame thanks to Porter. It was that she had to fight tooth and nail to free herself from his control. While her grace in handling the situation kept her image untarnished, the truth of what Porter put her through forever changed how Nashville remembered their glittering partnership. 9. Merle Haggard, the ex-con behind the music. Merle Haggard, the voice behind Okie from Muskogee, became a working-class hero, but Nashville long carried a rumor about his past that seemed too shameful to be true. Whispers claimed that before he ever strummed a guitar on stage, Merle was a convict serving hard time for theft and attempted escape. To fans, it sounded like tabloid trash. How could one of the greatest storytellers of country music really have been a career criminal? But the rumor was true, and Merle himself later laid it bare. Growing up poor and restless, he drifted into crime early, racking up arrests for robbery, assault, and petty theft. His lowest moment came when he tried to escape from jail, only to be caught and sent to California's notorious San Quentin prison. There, at just 20 years old, he shared a cell block with hardened criminals and stared down the possibility of life behind bars. The disgusting part of the rumor wasn't just the crimes themselves, but the details Merle later admitted: hustling for cigarettes, fighting to survive in prison yards, and the sheer desperation of a man who had lost all control of his life. Ironically, it was in that dark place that music saved him. Merle watched Johnny Cash perform at San Quentin and decided to turn his life around. When he emerged, scarred but unbroken, he poured his past into his songs. Mama Tried and Sing Me Back Home weren't just hits, they were confessions, rooted in the truth of his criminal history. What Nashville once whispered as a disgusting rumor became Merle's most authentic brand. He didn't run from his sins. He turned them into some of the rawest, most powerful country music ever written. 10. Keith Whitley, Drowning in the Bottle. Keith Whitley was hailed as one of the purest voices of 1980s country, a rising star whose emotional ballads promised a long, golden career. But behind the angelic voice, Nashville buzzed with a grim rumor that Whitley's drinking was so out of control, it was only a matter of time before it killed him. For years, fans brushed it aside as mean-spirited gossip. Surely the young, handsome star with hits like Don't Close Your Eyes couldn't already be spiraling toward ruin. But the whispers proved devastatingly true. Keith Whitley battled alcohol addiction from his teenage years, and as his fame grew, so did the bottle's grip on him. Friends recalled him starting to drink heavily before breakfast, downing glass after glass of vodka as if it were water. On tour, his bandmates were forced to drag him from hotel rooms and nurse him through blackouts, while managers scrambled to cover for missed rehearsals and canceled appearances. The disgusting reality wasn't just the volume of alcohol, but the public unraveling of a man who seemed destined for greatness. His body bore the toll, shaking hands, bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, and yet the industry often turned a blind eye, hoping his talent would outweigh the chaos. The end came tragically fast. On May 9, 1989, at just 34 years old, Keith Whitley was found dead at home with a blood alcohol level nearly 6 times the legal limit. The rumor that he was drinking himself to death wasn't only true, it was heartbreakingly prophetic. His death shocked Nashville and left behind an unfinished legacy, a haunting reminder that the brightest voices can be silenced by the darkest addictions. 11. Johnny Paycheck, the Baroom shooting. Johnny Paycheck, famous for his defiant anthem, "Take This Job and Shove It," carried a rowdy outlaw image that seemed tailor-made for gossip. For years, Nashville insiders whispered a particularly disgusting rumor that Paycheck had once pulled out a gun in a bar fight and actually shot someone. Many dismissed it as tall-tale bravado, the kind of outlaw myth fans invented to make their heroes seem wilder than they really were. But the truth was no exaggeration. In 1985, Paycheck got into a heated argument at a bar in Hillsboro, Ohio. Fueled by alcohol and rage, he pulled out a pistol and shot a man in the head. Miraculously, the victim survived. The shocking incident confirmed what had long been whispered, that Paycheck's outlaw persona wasn't just an act. He was volatile, dangerous, and reckless enough to pull the trigger when provoked. The fallout was enormous. Paycheck was convicted of aggravated assault and sentenced to 9 years in prison. Overnight, his career collapsed. Venues blacklisted him, radio stations pulled his songs, and the once celebrated country star found himself behind bars. Fans who thought the Baroom shooting was just a rumor were confronted with the ugly reality splashed across national headlines. The disgusting truth wasn't only the violence of the act, but how closely it mirrored the self-destructive streak running through so many of country's legends. Johnny Paycheck lived the outlaw life until it consumed him, proving that sometimes the wild stories aren't myth at all. They're scars carved into the history of Nashville. 12. Billy Joe Shaver, pulling the trigger in a bar fight. Billy Joe Shaver, one of country music's most respected songwriters, built his reputation on gritty authenticity. But for years, a rumor followed him that seemed too outrageous, even for an outlaw poet, that he had shot a man during a Baroom brawl and walked away without consequence. Fans whispered about it in hushed tones. Was the gentle lyricist of "I'm just an old chunk of coal" really capable of something so violent? The rumor turned out to be true. In 2007, outside a bar near Waco, Texas, Shaver got into a heated confrontation with a man named Billy Coker. Words escalated, tempers flared, and Shaver pulled a revolver, firing a bullet straight into Coker's face. Miraculously, the victim survived. When police arrested Shaver, he admitted to the shooting, but insisted it was self-defense. In his own blunt way, he later quipped, "I shot him right between a mother and a fucker. He dropped like a rock." The trial became national news, with Shaver's outlaw image put under the harshest spotlight. Astonishingly, a jury acquitted him, buying his claim of self-defense despite the shocking details. For many, the disgusting truth wasn't just that the rumor of the shooting was real. It was that Shaver essentially confessed and still walked free. The incident permanently altered his legacy. While his songs continued to inspire artists from Willie Nelson to Waylon Jennings, the image of a weathered songwriter pulling the trigger in a drunken bar fight became forever welded to his myth. Billy Joe Shaver proved that sometimes country legends don't just write outlaw ballads, they live them in the most brutal way imaginable.